This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. It took me a little while to figure this out, but I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have been happy with any Les Paul shaped object that didn't end up A, being the shape of a Les Paul, and B, having Gibson on the headstock. This is not what I'm like about all of my gear. In fact, like the guitars you see me playing most of the time are K-line Strats, which are copies, obviously, of a Fender Strat in a lot of ways, right? They're kind of built in the way that old Strats were built. The headstock on them isn't even right. So I'm not like this about all of my gear, and a lot of the time you hear me playing through digital imitations of real gear. So why is it that Gibson is the one thing for me where I feel like actually playing authentic is a bit of a thing? I'm not exactly sure why, but I wanted to investigate that a little bit in this video, kind of psychology wise. If you have your favourite brands of builders that build a really good Les Paul, let me know in the comments. For me, this is not the best Les Paul that I've ever played, right? I think that would go to the Gibson Murphy Lab that Jake owns. An incredible guitar, incredibly lightweight, really nice small frets, really well made, looks incredible, all of that good stuff. I had an Epiphone Joe Bonamassa, which actually I rate, I think, a little higher than this particular Gibson Les Paul. That had a long tenon. I think it actually looked really pretty. I sold that to a guy in America. I don't know why exactly, but for some reason, I think it was probably because I felt like I could sell that one easier than my actual Les Paul. As it turns out, I could. I had a Maybach Leicester, which I think I sold basically because the colours didn't do the same thing for me that the actual Gibson that I have does. I do still have my sire Larry Colton, which I think is actually an incredibly fine guitar, but it doesn't say Gibson on the headstock. But I'm going to keep it anyway because that one I think is a great example of a guitar that didn't cost a load of money but is a good guitar. And I've also got what I'm going to do the outro on, a Tokai, which is the right shape. We'll come on to that anyway. So what is going on here? Now I think for me the Les Paul is a guitar that I've had to sort of work harder to understand than almost any other guitars that I've ever played. It's heavier than my normal guitars, as you know, Les Paul. It's harder to reach some of these frets than on my other guitars, although it does have a 22nd fret where my Strats don't, so advantage there. It doesn't have single coil tones particularly, because it's dual humbucking. The body is kind of thick. However, I think the Les Paul is an iconic looking thing, and I think for me that's what I'm drawn to about the Les Paul more than anything else, more than maybe even the tones or anything like that. I think it's like the actual look of the thing, and if you're going based mostly on looks with an instrument, not entirely looks, but like quite a lot of what is going on here I think is like my childhood thing where I'm thinking like, does this look like the sort of thing Gary Moore, Scott Gorham, etc. would have played? And the fact is that I think most of them had Gibson on the headstock. I think John Sykes might be one of the few that played, I think, a Tokai, and he played with Thin Lizzy for a bit, right? Steve Ray Vaughan obviously played a Tokai version of a Strat, which is kind of a cool thing as well. But is that it? I think that's probably it for me, really, because I'm tapping into some sort of childhood thingy. The kind of instruments that I looked up when I was a kid, including the awful Gecko Green Les Paul and the slightly less awful, I think, Latte Cream. In around sort of 2002, 2004, I'd have been sat in IT classes looking at Ibanez websites and looking at Gibsons. I can remember Gibson Voodoo from about that era too. And this is from 2002, which is about when I would have been looking at things. So that's, I think, why for me, I think it had to say Gibson on it before I really settled on the idea that that would be the one that I'd stick with. Top wrapping it also made a huge difference. Leaving it out of the case, I think, has also meant that the neck doesn't feel sticky when I get it out. I'm more inclined to play it. So that, for me, I think, is why it's got to say Gibson on it. Would I buy a modern Gibson? I'm not entirely sure. The Gibson Greenie that I played, I bought that for the channel. It was incredibly heavy, like over £10, like £10.5. Pretty well made. And looked really pretty, and I think those pickups sound really good. But yeah, that was basically like a Gibson faded, essentially, right, with some different pickups in it. If money was no object, probably I'd be going for like a Gibson R8, something like that. But for me, the standard, finding it a decent enough standard that is built to a good standard, I think has satisfied me enough. It knocked a PRS DGT out of the house, so the jobs are good. But I do think something psychological about it, where if it didn't say Gibson on the headstock, this would have probably gone a little while ago. Let me know if you've got a non-negotiable in that sense as well. Does it have to say Gibson or not? This is the only brand really which I feel that about to some extent, so bit of a weird one. Here's a Tokai, which I was sent by the folks at Rose Morris. Now, the only issue that I have with this really is that this Tokai in particular is poly. If it wasn't poly, I think that Tokai do make plenty of non-poly stuff, or they certainly used to, nitro stuff. This is a really great guitar too. I think the headstock looks close enough that that would work too, and the body obviously is pretty spot on. I think this one almost gets me to the childhood kind of vibe, but that lack of poly probably means that it wouldn't age like a pair of jeans like the Gibson does, because they do age quite quickly. So I think that's part of the charm with the Gibson thing. But yeah, I was speaking to Beebs the other day, and he said, well, what about, have you ever tried a PRS single cut? I was like, I don't really feel like that scratch the same itch. And nags, all of this sort of stuff, to me, it's not quite doing the thing if it doesn't say Gibson on it for some reason. It's a bit weird. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll catch you in another video soon. Using Helix Native for this, I'll flash up on the screen what that preset was if you want to jump into the Gumroad folder and try those out. Cheers for stopping by.